Thanks for tuning in. Let me know where you're watching from. Feel free to drop a comment below. Let's dive in. Erin's boss, Brad, was one of those guys who loved to walk around acting like he was some kind of alpha male, like it was a badge of honor. He thrived on control and didn't hesitate to show off how important he thought he was. But the worst part? He actually made a pass at my wife, Erin, as if our marriage didn't even matter. That really got under my skin. I couldn't believe someone could be that bold. That evening, I came home expecting to find Erin already there, like she always was. Normally, I'd come in, smell dinner cooking, and hear the usual sound of her moving around the kitchen. It felt like home. But tonight, something was different. She wasn't there yet, and it was already getting late. My stomach knotted up a little, like I knew something wasn't right. I grabbed my phone and was about to call her when it buzzed in my hand. "Hey, still at the office?" I texted, trying to sound calm even though worry was creeping up on me. "Yeah, but I'm on my way home now," she replied. "I've got a surprise for you." That caught me off guard. Should I start dinner? Or should I order something? I asked. "No need," she said, her voice upbeat but oddly distant. "We won't have time for that tonight." And then she hung up before I could ask more. I was left standing there, more confused than ever. About 20 minutes later, she walked in, and the second I saw her, my heart sank. She looked off. Her clothes were wrinkled, her stockings were gone, and her makeup was smudged. Her hair was all messed up, like she'd been through a whirlwind. I tried to sound casual, but I couldn't help noticing everything. "Tough day?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she came over and hugged me, holding on longer than usual. She even squeezed tighter. Then, she whispered, "You know I love you more than anything, right? You'd do anything for me, wouldn't you?" I nodded, not really sure where this was going. Over the years, I'd always gone out of my way to make her happy. But something about the way she said it made me feel uneasy, like there was something she wasn't telling me. Then she started talking about Brad. Apparently, he'd been having these deep conversations with her at work, and it wasn't just small talk. He'd been talking about relationships, about roles, and how things might be better if the man takes a step back. She said it got to her, and she'd been thinking about it. "You know, you let me make a lot of the little decisions, where we go on vacation, what we eat for dinner. I really appreciate that," she said, looking at me with a serious expression. "But Brad has been saying some relationships are stronger when the man doesn't take charge so much." It sparked something in me, something I didn't even know was missing. "Erin," I said, trying to wrap my head around what she was saying, "I'm fine with you making decisions on the small stuff, but the big stuff, like our home and finances, that's something we decide together. It's not about control. It's about being partners equal. That's what I've always believed a marriage is." She seemed to soften, her voice getting quieter. "Maybe," she said, "but Brad sees things differently. He's confident. He believes men like you, kind and supportive, are better suited to a more supportive role. And he's been sharing his thoughts with me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Brad, this arrogant guy, had gotten into her head and twisted everything we had. "Is this what this is about, Erin? What are you really trying to say?" She hesitated before speaking, and I felt my stomach drop. "Brad has, well, he's been more direct with me lately. He's confident, and it's hard to ignore. I know it's wrong, but I've gotten caught up in it. It's been exciting." "Exciting?" I repeated, almost choking on the word. My mind raced, and I couldn't quite make sense of any of it. She looked away, avoiding my eyes. "These past few weeks, I found myself thinking about him, Jake, and he mentioned that maybe you'd be open to it. Maybe you'd even enjoy watching us. He's convinced it'll make us feel more alive, more connected. And when I come back to you, we can be even better." I stood there, frozen, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me this was some weird joke. But she didn't. She was dead serious. "Erin," I finally managed, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Are you really suggesting this? Do you actually think I'd be okay with this?" She looked at me, almost pleading. "Jake, I know you love me, and I know you want me to be happy. I really think this could take us to a whole new level. Have you done anything with him?" I asked, feeling sick to my stomach. "No, Jake," she replied, though there was hesitation in her voice. I haven't slept with him, but we've gotten close. I've touched him. We've talked in ways I know I shouldn't have. A wave of disgust rushed over me. And he's here? I asked. Yes, she whispered, barely audible. He's outside. We're going to talk, and then he's coming inside. You can watch if you want. Afterward, I'll come back to you. You can have me however you want. I could feel the rage building inside me. Are you out of your mind, Erin? I shouted, barely holding it together. The thought of being with you after him makes me sick. Her eyes widened, but she didn't back down. I know it sounds crazy, Jake, but once you see how this strengthens us, you'll understand. It could be incredible for us. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to calm down. No, Erin. Absolutely not. You've crossed a line. I'm telling you right now, send him away. For a moment, she seemed stunned. Then her voice softened, almost pleading. Jake, you always let me have my way. Why not this time? This is going to be good for us, I'm sure of it. Without another word, she turned and headed toward the stairs. Let him in when you're ready, she called over her shoulder. I stood there, reeling from everything she had just said. How could she be so blind to the destruction she was causing? I could feel the anger growing in me, like I was about to explode. I stormed into the kitchen, grabbed her purse, her phone, and our shared credit card. My eyes landed on a dish towel, and an idea began to form. I opened a drawer, grabbed a couple of zip ties, and took the large carving knife from the block. My heart was pounding. I was ready to face the man who had turned my world upside down. Brad was sitting in his car, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. He didn't even notice me at first, but when he did, he looked up with that smug grin I'd gotten used to seeing and rolled down the window, giving me a cocky smirk. So, Erin finally told you, huh? He said, his voice dripping with arrogance. Don't worry, you can have her for now, but soon enough, she'll be mine. Before he could say another word, I lost it. My fist flew, landing a punch right on his nose. The crack of it echoed in the quiet air, and for a split second, everything was still. Brad grabbed his face, stunned, and I tossed him a dish towel. You'll need this, I said, watching him press it to his bleeding nose. Without wasting any time, I grabbed a zip tie from my pocket and tied his wrist to the headrest of the car seat. He tried to pull away, but before he could react, I yanked open the door and hit him again, this time in the gut, the spot he loved to brag about during his fitness talks. He doubled over, gasping for breath, his wrist stuck to the seat. I didn't stop. I grabbed his other hand and tied it to the steering wheel. He was completely stuck now, trapped in his own car, unable to move. I leaned in close, lowering my voice. So this is what you think being an alpha looks like, huh? Pathetic. You messed with the wrong guy, Brad. Trust me, you're going to regret this. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I didn't care. Reaching for the garden hose nozzle, I swung it at the side window. The glass shattered instantly, and I didn't stop there. I smashed the windshield, watching it crack into a spiderweb pattern, each hit satisfying in its destruction. Moving to the front of the car, I destroyed the headlights one by one. Each blow gave me a dark sense of satisfaction. When I finally stopped, I walked back to the driver's side and chuckled under my breath. Looks like your precious car is going to need some serious repairs, Brad. His face was a mess, a mixture of fear and pain. I pulled out the carving knife I'd grabbed earlier and held it up to his throat, pressing the blade lightly against his skin, right near his jugular. His eyes went wide. Please, Jake, he stammered, his voice shaking. I never meant for things to go this far. It was just a bit of fun. It didn't mean anything, I swear. I'll leave. I'll never come back. I glared at him, my voice low and full of disgust. I'm not going to finish you today, but listen closely. If I hear a single word about this from the cops, or if anything comes back to me because of you, I'll find you. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but when you least expect it, I'll finish what I started here. I leaned in closer, my words cold. This is your choice. You can either make this the last time we ever meet, or you can spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. With that, I stabbed the knife into the car seat beside him, letting it sink deep into the fabric. Erin's going to need this to cut you loose. Drive her far away. Go to the hospital. I don't care. But make sure I never see you or her again. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and headed back toward the house, my heart still pounding with adrenaline. As I shut the door behind me, I could hear Erin calling from upstairs. Brad, did you and Jake talk things out? Her voice, so innocent, was a slap to the face. She had no idea what had just gone down. No clue what I'd just done. I didn't answer, and instead, I called up to her, forcing my voice to stay calm. Erin, Brad's still outside. He wants to have a word with you. A few moments later, Erin came downstairs in nothing but a silk robe that barely covered the lingerie I'd bought her years ago. She looked at me, confusion written all over her face. What happened? Jake, did you tell him everything's fine? I made sure she understood the situation. I made it clear what's at stake for him. You should go meet him. Erin's eyes narrowed, like she sensed something wasn't right. But she didn't ask any more questions. She slipped out the door and headed toward Brad's car. As soon as the door shut behind her, I moved quickly. I went upstairs, grabbed a suitcase, and started filling it with her things. Clothes, shoes, toiletries, everything. I moved fast, almost mechanically, my actions fueled by the adrenaline still coursing through me. I emptied her drawers and cleared her things from the bathroom, even tossing in her makeup bag and tennis shoes. When everything was packed, I opened the guest room window and shouted down to her, Erin, you're going to need this. I shoved the suitcase out the window. It hit the driveway with a thud, and the sound of glass breaking filled the air as her perfume bottle shattered. Her shoes followed, one of them barely missing her. She looked up at me, and I could see the shock and hurt in her eyes as tears started to fall. Jake, what are you doing? I leaned out the window, my voice cold. Isn't this what you wanted, Erin? You made it clear you'd rather be with him. Her tears flowed faster, and she tried to explain, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you, Jake. I thought this was something we could explore together, something that would bring us closer. Please, let's talk. We can fix this. I shook my head, my voice steady and flat. You've been lost in some kind of delusion ever since you walked through that door tonight, expecting me to go along with this fantasy. I don't even know who you are anymore. Either way, I'm done. I paused, then added, take your alpha to the hospital, or wherever you want. But if I hear even a whisper about tonight, there will be consequences. Her face crumpled as she clutched the suitcase, shame and guilt washing over her. Please, Jake, she whispered. I'll do anything to fix this. Let me in, and we can talk. I won't see Brad again. I love you. I stared down at her, unmoved. I'll pack the rest of your things. You can pick them up later. Don't come back here with that. With that, I slammed the window shut. Her sobs echoed from outside as I walked away from the window, unable to ignore her cries. I grabbed her purse from the counter, opened the door, and tossed it at her. It hit her in the chest and dropped to the ground. As I locked the door again, I could still hear her desperate calls, but I was done. I headed into the kitchen, grabbed a cold beer from the fridge, and cracked it open. I sat at the table, staring out the window as the adrenaline slowly wore off. I watched as Erin tried to cut Brad free. Her hands were shaking as she fumbled with the knife I'd left for her. Finally, she managed to free him, and they both climbed into the car. Erin, looking back at the house one last time, eyes full of regret, slowly drove away with him. I took a long sip of beer, feeling the sharp taste settle in. As I watched them leave, my mind couldn't fully grasp how everything had escalated so fast. How my life had completely flipped upside down in just one night. Never in a million years had I imagined I'd be standing there, watching her leave with a man she'd chosen over me. In the days after everything went down, I ignored every attempt Erin made to reach me. I knew she was probably calling from different numbers or leaving messages, but I didn't bother listening to any of it. At that point, I didn't care what she had to say. A part of me wondered if Brad would press charges, considering what had happened, and I half expected the cops to show up at my door. But nothing came. No knocks, no questions, no consequences. I guess Brad knew better than to get the authorities involved. He probably realized it wouldn't end well for him. Even so, I knew I'd have to face Erin eventually. I couldn't just ignore her forever. There were things to settle, and running away wasn't the answer. So, after a few days of silence, I called her back. "Come by in an hour," I said, my voice flat, offering nothing more than a need to talk. She showed up right on time, looking completely drained. Her face was a mess, red, swollen eyes and tear stains everywhere. She paused at the porch like she was trying to find the right words, then sat down next to me. For a long time, we sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Neither of us knew where to start. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was shaky. "Jake, I'm sorry. I don't know how I could have believed Brad when he told me you'd be okay with this. I thought maybe it was his confidence, or the way he talked, that made me think it was a good idea. But now I see it. It was all crazy. I love you, Jake. You're the only one I want. Please let me come home. I'll do anything to fix this." I looked at her, the anger still simmering inside me, but I kept myself calm. "Tell me, Erin," I said coldly. "How was he in bed?" Her face turned pale, and she quickly shook her head. "Jake, stop," she begged. "Please. It never went that far." I didn't say a word. I just stared at her, waiting for her to explain. She took a shaky breath, then continued. "After that night we talked, I realized how wrong everything was. I didn't sleep with him. He's scared of you, Jake. The next day, he fired me. He said he didn't want anything more to do with me. And after what you did to him, he ended up in the hospital. He told them it was a robbery, and I went along with it. I didn't want you to get into trouble." I let out a slow breath, sarcasm dripping from my words. "Well, at least he did one thing right." Erin looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Jake, I know I messed up, but I'm here now. I want to come back. I want to be your wife again. You're the only one I want. Please forgive me." I took another breath, my words slow and steady. "We spent 5 years together, Erin. For the first 2, we were in love. The last 3, we built a life together. But now you've already gone looking for something else. Maybe you think you love me. Maybe you do, in some way. But it's clear you don't respect me. If you did, you wouldn't have entertained the idea of bringing Brad into our marriage." She tried to hold back her tears, but I wasn't done. "If you respected me, Erin, you wouldn't have thought I'd just stand by while you brought another man into our relationship. If you loved me, none of this would have crossed your mind." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "The truth is, Erin, you've already crossed a line. Maybe you didn't sleep with him, but you let him into our relationship. You let him break what we had. You let yourself get lost in his fantasy while I was sitting here, trying to hold things together." Her voice was barely audible as she whispered, "I swear I'll never do anything like this again." I shook my head. "My decision final? It's already done. And we both know this wouldn't be the last time. Maybe not next year, or even in 5 years, but eventually you'd get bored or think you missed something and you'd find another excuse. Trust is broken, Erin. You can't rebuild it, not after everything that's happened." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't let myself waver. "We don't have kids. Our savings aren't much. And this house, it's not even close to being paid off. Staying with you now is a risk I'm not willing to take. I don't trust you anymore. And even worse, I've lost respect for you." She buried her face in her hands, but I pressed on. "We're getting a divorce. You can keep your car. I'll keep mine. We'll split what we've got and sell the house. You can go find someone who suits the life you're looking for. Someone who'll love you the way you want to be loved. I've already hired a divorce lawyer. We can do this civilly, or you can get your own lawyer, but either way, we're done. I'll start moving out next week, and we'll list the house." She shook her head, pleading. "Jake, please. I made a huge mistake, but don't throw us away. I love you. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I looked at her one last time. "I've said everything there is to say. It's time for both of us to move on." Without another word, I started packing her things into her car. She looked at me the whole time, her eyes desperate, but I didn't feel anything anymore. "Goodbye, Erin," I said, closing the door on our marriage and locking it behind me. The days after that felt strange. After years of putting Erin first, I found myself alone in an empty house. But to my surprise, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. It wasn't the future I had planned, but it was one I could face.